Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This is the Navigating Uncertainty series delivered in partnership with the LightHouse Arabia under the Femtech Hub at the Women's Pavilion in collaboration with Meme Foundation, American Hospital Dubai, and Pericare, where we are creating space for open conversations around women's health and emotional well-being. These sessions are designed to reflect how women are actually experiencing their lives today, while providing practical tools and perspectives to help navigate periods of uncertainty. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon. The Q&A box is open, so please feel free to drop any questions you have in there and we'll try to address them as we move through the conversation. I'm delighted that we are joined by Kritzas, counseling psychologist at the LightHouse Arabia, an influential voice in mental health and well-being, and the founder of the innovative edutainment brand Smart Heart. Kристин, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Maha and Aya. Lovely to be here with both of you here today.
And today's conversation is a little bit different because, as you can see, I am joined not only by our guest speaker, Kристин, but also by my daughter, Aya, a Year 12 student who will be helping to lead the conversation today from the perspective of a young woman navigating many of these questions herself. Thank you, Aya, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So today's conversation focuses on a stage of life that comes with a lot of change, possibility, and uncertainty. Whether it's choosing what to study, preparing for university, starting a career, or simply trying to figure out what comes next. Many young women are navigating significant pressure and expectation, and that pressure could be further compounded when external uncertainties come into the mix. So today we're going to explore how young women protect their mental well-being, build resilience, and move through uncertainty with greater confidence. So Kристин, to start us off, from your perspective, what do you see young women struggling with most right now when it comes to uncertainty, especially around school, starting university, or even stepping into the early stages of a career?
Well, is it just me, or have the past 18 months been constant change for so many of us, and living through this constant change? And the moment you feel like you've got it, you are, set, nothing's going to change, the next thing comes. And I'm just seeing through my work with clients, whether it be students or adults, changes in the school front, in the workforce, with regard to technology, your next iOS update. There are things that are constantly changing. But I think the biggest struggle young women face is the pressure to have certainty in a time of their life that is inherently uncertain. And so I think it's something that we just need to normalize over here, is that clarity is not going to be there. And what do we do when clarity is not there? That's the one thing I would say. The other thing is that you're growing up in this generation of this rise in social media usage, and there's this constant comparison to your peers. There's this constant comparing yourself to somebody's highlighted reels, okay? And so you often think to yourself that you're behind. And what I've seen a lot of young women do when they see this one's off to, study at this Ivy League, and this one's off to, they've been promoted in their new job, my client is then internalizing that as a failure on their part, when in actual fact it is just, you need to stay in your lane. And I'll speak a bit more about that a bit later. But something else that I've also seen with uncertainty is that our brains are constantly seeking predictability. Our brains feel like, I've got this when I am, know that this is going to happen next and that's going to happen next. And what I want to say to you is that magic and opportunity do not reside in your comfort zone. And so if you want to see positive change, you're going to need to take that step outside of your comfort zone, which isn't easy to do.
Yeah. I think that's definitely something a lot of young people can relate to. And I know that you had a question around the pressure to have everything figured out.
Yeah, I think a lot of us feel pressure to have a plan and to know what comes next, whether that's university, a career, or just our future in general. Why does that feel so overwhelming, and how should we be thinking about it differently?
I think it feels overwhelming because we are taught from a young age that the time that you're going to leave school, you've got to have it figured out. You've got to make one big decision for the rest of your life. When you are 16, 17 years old, you need to make a decision about that career that you're going to get yourself into. Let me tell you something. I'm 42 years old and I'm still figuring out what it is that I want to do. Okay. So the fact that you need to know now what you're going to do for the next 60 years or longer, let's just put that to rest. Let's say to you, instead of having it all figured out, what I have seen in my own life, and I can only speak about my own life, is that from the time I left school, every 7 years, and it's interesting that it was every 7 years, but it really was every 7 years. Every 7 years, I got to meet a different Kristine. Every 7 years, I got to discover something new about myself. Your mom mentioned earlier me having founded the edutainment brand Smart Heart. Only when I was 28 years old did that idea come to me to create a board game for children. But that was inside of me for all those years. So I only discovered that skill then. And when I was 40 years old, I discovered that I love flowers and gardening, So every phase of your life, you're going to discover something new about yourself. And what I encourage my clients to do is to not think about what's my perfect path, but what's my next step going to be? And you can change your mind at any point in time. I think that's the one message I want to give to you. You can turn around and say to people, I changed my mind. And
Yeah, there's that perpetual question we always tend to ask young people is, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'm thinking, well, if someone asked me that, I'm still deciding. My CV looks like 5 different people. I've done many different things and pivoted, and many people have. So we don't have to have it all figured out forever. And we hear a lot about having a growth mindset. And that can be really difficult when things aren't going to plan. So what does a healthy, realistic version of that look like for young women? And how can it help them move forward when things feel really uncertain?
I think it would be important to distinguish between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset first. What we know about a fixed mindset is that there's this belief that our abilities are carved in stone. And so if it is that I'm not good at running, I will never be good at running. And that's a fixed mindset. But a growth mindset is one where we believe that our abilities can develop over time. And the key word here is develop. And something that I want all of you to think about today is, what's the story that I tell myself about myself? What stories do I have about myself that are self-limiting, that are restrictive, that keep me stuck in that comfort zone? Because what I want to say is that although it's a comfort zone, what I've seen often is that that comfort zone starts feeling quite uncomfortable. Okay, so the story that I often hear from my clients is, oh, I'm not a morning person. If I introduce, gym as an option, or oh, I'm not good in the kitchen. I'm not good with baking. I'm not a runner. And I've often said to my clients, you genius, you, because the more you tell yourself, I'm not a runner, I'm not a morning person, guess what? You never have to go and run a race, and you never have to get up early in the morning and go do what you need to do. So your story as much as it keeps you comfortable, is keeping you stuck. So I invite all of you on this call to think about what are those stories you tell yourself? Because I've had a genius story that I'm not good with directions, true story. And so whenever we would go on holiday, I wouldn't give my license to drive the car. So my poor sister had to drive the car on every single holiday we went on because I'm not good with directions. So look how it served me all those years until one day she said, no, hand in your license, you driving. And so I want you to think about the stories you tell yourself that lead to that fixed mindset. With growth mindset, it's this idea that we can still learn, we can stay teachable. We practice the power of yet. I'm not good at running yet. Because when you put the word yet at the end of the sentence, it opens up this world of opportunity. And Google, the company Google, has done something really well. They've got this culture of experimentation, and they teach their employees to fail fast. And what they mean by that is, if you can fail fast, you can admit defeat fast, and you can then learn what didn't work, and you can redirect and change the course of something, and it will be less expensive than staying on the wrong track for too long. And the other thing with growth mindset is these individuals have got self-compassion, because research shows us when we meet ourselves with criticism after a setback or a failure, we are less motivated to try at that task again. So we need to be kind to ourselves as we are going through whatever it is that we're going through.
Oh, being kind to ourselves. This is something that's come up in every conversation. It just keeps coming back to self-compassion. But alongside all of that, there's this conversation, a lot of conversation about resilience and a lot of messaging about how about staying positive and how all this uncertainty is making our young people more resilient. So how do we differentiate between genuine resilience and something that feels like the pressure to push through and stay positive?
So I think when I hear the word stay positive, I immediately think of toxic positivity. And I think it's important just to draw some attention to toxic positivity, which is the denial of the human experience. Toxic positivity, when we practice that, we don't give ourselves the chance to experience difficult feelings. Whereas with resilience, we are open to difficult feelings alongside trying. And if I can give a powerful analogy over here, is that, when we're trying to think about what is toxic positivity and what's realistic optimism, which is what we actually want for our children and for ourselves, I want you to imagine that you're standing in a dark tunnel. The person that is practicing toxic positivity is standing in the dark tunnel and they're saying, I'm just so grateful to be alive, and I'm hopeful that there's light at the end of this tunnel. Okay, so that's the toxic positivity. The person standing in the tunnel and practicing realistic optimism is standing there and saying, I'm standing in this dark tunnel. A part of me feels scared. A part of me is getting cold. A part of me is worried that I'm not going to get out of here. And then there's a part of me that's grateful that I'm alive. And there's a part of me that's hopeful that I'm going to make it through to the other side. So people who are resilient are often very familiar with these different parts of themselves. And you never need to look at yourself as all of me. Because I will have students saying, all of me, I'm not ready to do X, Y, and Z. But it's a part of you that's not ready. Because there is a part of you that is a Spartan and is brave. And so when we're thinking about resilience, it is giving ourselves permission to feel all of our feelings. Because being courageous doesn't mean there's no fear. There is fear. I am fearful and I'm brave. So it's and language, not all language. Language to me is so important. The language you use will determine the way you will go. So to remember, how am I speaking about this right now?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it really does. And I think confidence is another area that comes up a lot, especially with students my age. How can we begin to build confidence when we don't really fully know what we're doing yet?
That's a really good question, Aya. And I would say that confidence has a compounding effect. You don't just wake up one day and all of a sudden I'm confident. It grows with time. And I have a personal story I want to share with you. When I was a first-year university student, the first psychology test I ever wrote, it was literally Psych 101. I failed that test. I got 13 out of 30. I will never forget it. And I came out of that class and I looked at the paper and I thought, Kristine, if the rest of your first year looks like this, you're going to be here for a very long time and Baba's going to be paying a lot of money, okay? And so, like, you want to become a psychologist, don't you? And I was like, yes, that's what I want. And I was like, well, then I've got to change something. And the next test that I wrote in that subject, I got a distinction. And that was one data point that I now had that I can get distinctions. And then the next test came along and I got another distinction. And I realized, hold on a second, if I just apply myself and I sit down and I make time for this, I am someone who gets distinctions. And James Clear says that if you want to change your trajectory, you've got to change your identity. And so I started saying to myself, I'm a cum laude. I get distinctions. Meantime, I mean, if you look at my matric certificate, there are D's and C's and all the others. But I was like, I'm a cum laude. And so what happens with confidence is that different parts of the brain play into you being confident. There's the hippocampus that comes to play. So there's memory now of me succeeding. And so there's that muscle memory of me doing it again. Okay. The other thing that I do with confidence is I actually visualize that I'm going to be confident in that specific event. So leading up to this session with you girls, I visualized that I'm going to sit here today and I'm going to speak with confidence. And leading up to every evening in bed, I'll close my eyes and I'll think about this. And what am I going to say? And how's it going to be met? And you girls are going to be smiling back at me while I'm telling you X, Y, and Z. And that is what leads to the confidence. So visualizing success, even when you don't know the road ahead, you've got to create some predictability within you that I've got this no matter which way it goes. So what I want to leave you with when it comes to confidence is that it's a muscle. You keep practicing it. You keep building momentum for it. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it can also be quite overwhelming, right?
Yeah, I find that us students, we're dealing with a lot of overwhelming things, whether it's stress, anxiety, and uncertainty. What are some things that we can soothe ourselves in those moments and protect our mental well-being in a way that feels realistic and doable?
So what I would say is that routine is the antidote to anxiety and overwhelm. So let's just start over there. Having a routine to your day is one way to minimize decision fatigue. So what I mean by this is you don't need to wake up in the morning and think, am I going to go for a run, or am I going to stay in bed, or am I going to have some hot water with lemon, or am I going to go onto social media? You know, because you have a routine already, what it is that you're going to do. And another short personal story that I can share with you is that a few years ago, I found myself like in this hamster wheel of just being busy. And I felt like I was nearing burnout. And I realized that my morning routine was problematic. I would wake up in the morning, and the first thing I would do is go onto Facebook, I'm really giving away my age at Facebook, go onto TikTok, go onto Instagram, and I would then go onto this website, and by 7:30 a.m. in the morning, I bought a dress online, and I've spoken to different people, and I'm wondering why I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And then I came across a segment by Robin Sharma, the author of The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And he spoke about owning your morning. And he said that if you win the first hour of the day, you win the day. And when you wake up in the morning, instead of being reactive because that's what you are when you're going on social media first thing in the morning. You're allowing the world to tell you how you should feel. You have no agency. And so I started owning my mornings, and I had to put down some hard and fast rules for myself about social media usage. And so I do have a rule for myself, which is no social media before 8 a.m. in the morning. If you see me online before 8 a.m., that's my team posting or doing something. I will not go online before 8 a.m. in the morning, and I won't check emails before 8 a.m. in the morning, because that's my time. And I need to give back to me so that I can give back to you. And so you want to think about how you can own your morning, Aya. I want you to think about what are some winning rituals that you can put in place, because you need to own your morning and you need to claim back your evening. Right? Because your bedtime routine actually starts in the morning. So if you want to get good night's sleep, which is what you need to get good grades, because if you're learning for a test and you get your deep sleep, that information goes from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. But if you pull an all-nighter, that information's going nowhere. And this is what I often say to people about drinking energy drinks and all that. No, just get your 8 hours of sleep, please. That's the most important. So owning your mornings, claiming your evenings, get into some sort of routine. And your routine in the holidays can be different to your routine in the school time. You can have two routines. I've got a weekday routine and I've got a weekend routine. So you can decide what that looks like.
Okay, so there's been a lot of reaction to owning the mornings and being off social media. I think many of us former young women are taking mental notes, saying that we need to practice what we preach. We're at that stage now in the academic career when, many families are navigating one of the biggest transitions now, which is getting ready to go to university, leaving home and heading off, which is exciting. But alongside that pride, what I'm seeing from a lot of my friends and people around me, mothers, is they're excited, but they're just not ready to let their daughters go. And I'm seeing it specifically from mothers of daughters. So how can we as mothers begin to manage those emotions in a way that doesn't unintentionally limit our daughters' independence?
Mm-hmm. What I want to say firstly is that it's completely normal to feel anxious about this new life change, and that it is a very big adjustment period that the parent goes through to see their young one go off to college. So just to normalize that it's perfectly normal that you may be feeling overwhelmed about it. But let's just say hypothetically, you made a decision that your daughter's not going to leave and that they're going to spend the first year at home with you after school. I would ask you to think about, is that decision helping my child grow, or is that decision helping me feel less anxious? And if it's the latter, if it's helping me feel less anxious, I would say, okay, let's look into that. Where are you feeling anxious about what's to come? Or is it your inner child that's feeling anxious about what's to come? Are you seeing your child for who they are, or are you projecting your own 17-year-old onto your child? Because maybe it could be that the parent wasn't ever allowed to leave home and had to stay home until they were 30 years old. And now the parent's going, I'm never going to do that to my child. I'm going to make sure my child has the freedom to go out whenever they want. So what happens? Pendulum parenting is what happens, and we need to be careful about that, because if you were deprived of something, you now go all the way to the other side of the pendulum to give your child whatever that is, or vice versa. So oftentimes in my work with parents, it's looking at, are you parenting your child here, or are you needing to reparent your inner child here? So I know this may open up a lot, and it's like, oh wow, where do we go from here? But the reality of it is that as a parent, you don't have to go at it alone when it comes to this big life transition. It's helpful to get support during that time because it is a very big transition. So what I would say to a parent is, you want to get into your own therapy process now to understand why and what is coming up for me. Before I transfer that anxiety onto my child, let me first just understand what this is for me. The other thing is, if it is that you have a really tight-knit, close bond with your daughter and you do a lot of things together, there is going to feel like there's this void when they go away. And already now, I would say, start looking into getting into a certain hobby that doesn't include your daughter, so that you have this alongside this change coming. So that when the change comes, it doesn't feel like this really big, like, oh, I dedicated my whole life to my kids and now they're gone. So there's certain things that one can do leading up to it, but just going back to it being completely normal that parents can feel this.
I say to a lot of my friends, the minute our children are born, this is what we're working towards, right? This is the moment where they need to spread their wings, and you've prepared them and helped them and supported them to this moment where they never need you, but hopefully always want you. But it can be really scary, that empty nest feeling that's, over sort of looming. But I know that you had an opposite question.
Yeah, for some students, sometimes it's actually the opposite. When parents feel ready for their child to take that next step, the student doesn't feel ready. And for girls feeling that way, how can she navigate that without feeling like she's falling behind or letting her parents down?
So again, I think, and this is something I often think about in any big transition in our life, are we ever 100% ready for it? I don't think we are ever 100% ready for it. But as the student who is maybe not feeling ready, it would be important to be able to communicate that to a parent. So I'm also going to say to you as the student, don't go at it alone. Don't internalize this and not say anything to your parent. Actually speak up about it. Communicate that I am not feeling ready right now. And what I would encourage you to do, Aya, is to communicate in parts. To say, a part of me doesn't feel ready at all. A part of me is a bit curious about what it could be like to go to university. But a very big part of me at the moment doesn't feel ready at all, because when we do parts work, we actually allow these different parts of us to speak about how we're doing. And as the parent, I'm going to say, I want the parent to think about this continuum with curiosity on the one side of the continuum and judgment and all-knowing on the other side. And as parents, we need to be curious with our children and not be in this position of, I know exactly why you're not feeling ready because you didn't study, and that's judgment and all-knowing. That shuts down conversation very quickly. So you want to stay in a position of curiosity with your children, because I think it then allows more conversation to come. So for example, if my child came to me and said, I'm not feeling ready, I would say to my child, what do you think it would look like if you were feeling ready? What in your eyes does ready actually look like in your actions, in your feelings? So to actually just understand what this readiness looks like for you, because you're never going to be fully ready for it. But I think it is important that you have a space to be able to speak to a parent about it, and a safe space to do so, and to have some sort of plan in place. Because let's say you feel like you're not ready because you're going to miss seeing your cat, Ollie. I believe you have a cat that might just make an appearance on the screen at any point in time. Well, then because if I was curious enough with you as a parent and I knew that that's why you weren't feeling ready, then I could say to you, okay, I've got to deal with you. Every evening while you're away, what's a good time to call you? 6 p.m.? Okay, I'm going to call you at 6 p.m. and you can say hello to Ollie. Like, let's have little things in place then that are going to make you feel more ready. And to meet your children uniquely, to treat your children uniquely and not treat your children equally, because your firstborn may have left and gone to university and said, sayonara, I'll see you guys in a year's time, and was really fine with it. Your second-born may need something different from you. So you want to understand what it is that they need. And this is why I often say to parents, don't treat your kids equally. No, treat your kids uniquely to what their specific temperament requires, what their needs are, where you're at that stage in your life. Because when your firstborn left the house, you may have been 36 years old. When your lastborn is leaving the house, you might be going full through midlife at 45. Okay? So you're going to also need something different.
Yeah. I think what we're also seeing, and Aya touched on that, is that idea of not letting people down, not disappointing your parents, not disappointing your grandparents and those expectations. And I think that that's something that girls inherently carry a little bit more, or a lot more than boys, that idea that they're responsible for other people's feelings and comfort. And perhaps they've learned it from our generation of people pleasing. And that's really heavy. That's really heavy for them to carry and feel responsible for.
Very.
Yeah. Okay, we have got questions coming in, and so I would love to, if the Q&A box is open to everyone joining us, so please do pop any questions in that you have. We have one question is based on mental health and well-being, which can help us navigate uncertainty better, pressure, and make us focus on personal development. We always talk about self-care, but what if the thing breaking you down isn't inside you, it's around you? How do you heal in that environment that hasn't changed?
Wow. That's a really good question, because what if I'm doing all the work? I'm on my own inner journey. I'm trying to heal through something, but my environment isn't conducive to that healing. I mean, of course, I would want more information about this to actually speak more to it. But from a more general point of view, what I would say is that I think it's important to remember what is in your control. So what is in my control is what I think of myself. What isn't in my control is what you think of me. What is in my control is how I move through certain things. And I often think of Viktor Frankl, who survived, and his book Man's Search for Meaning, and how he could not control what others were doing to him, but he could control his attitude to what was happening around him. And I often think that, when our environment maybe isn't supporting us, we need to learn the skill of setting mental boundaries with people in our life, to observe and not absorb. There's a great video on YouTube by this Dr. Rosenberg. If you just type in observe, don't absorb, this video comes up where he speaks about dealing with narcissists and how to manage that relationship. Now, I just share this with my clients to deal with difficult people. And so what he speaks about is learning to observe others and not absorb them. And I often say, imagine you've got a gold shield around your body when you're in that difficult environment, to know that you are protected, and that whoever's opinions or words are deflecting off that golden shield. So these visualization exercises help people who are actually living in environments where there's abuse or there's verbal abuse, etc.
Yeah. I think everyone's taken note of that and going to be Googling after this session. We've had another question come in. There's actually two which are quite similar and actually touches on what we touched on earlier, but I'd love to build on it, about comparing ourselves with others, and peer pressure and friends competing. I mean, when I was, again, I'm giving away my age, we didn't have social media, we didn't have any of that. And so peer pressure and comparing ourselves to people around us, it was a much smaller circle, but it still had that impact of questioning your self-worth or whether you're good enough for achieving. And of course, now for our young people, it's much bigger. It's social media. So for our young women joining us, and Aya above, what are maybe some practical tools when those words of self-doubt can start to creep in? How can they sort of put that wall and protect themselves?
Well, to your point, we didn't have social media. Okay, thank goodness we didn't have social media back in the day. I often think it's a really good thing that, we didn't have record of our lives back then. But I think that something that needs to shift, that is actually going to be very protective for your mental health and well-being, is to spend less time online. Now, even when we didn't have social media, we would also compare ourselves to our peers. But I do feel that this has been exacerbated through social media usage. And something that I want you to trial, you're really not going to like what I'm going to say now, but I'm going to say to you, just try it for me, okay? Because your life is one big experiment, and I love experimenting with myself. So I often try these things out, and I'll never share something with you that I haven't actually tried and tested myself. But something that I did last summer, or leading up to last summer, was I would take one day in the weekend and I wouldn't go on social media. Okay, so if it was a Saturday or a Sunday, the whole day, I would not go on Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn, anything, any social networking platform, TikTok. And what I found was that I had so much more time in my day when I didn't have social media. And what I did over the summer was I took 5 weeks off. So 5 weeks of no social media. And I felt more connected to Kritzas. I felt I was getting insights. I felt like ideas were coming to me. I was far more creative than what I am when I'm always on. And I felt that I was doing more things for me that were aligned with what I want for myself. I wasn't looking at the next person, and I wasn't on social media to see that their summer holiday was better than mine or whatever the case was. I was just really in the moment and enjoying what I was doing. So that's the one thing that I'm going to say, yeah, is look at your relationship with technology if you want to not have so much of that feeling of comparing yourself to others. The other thing I would say to you is know your values. Because when you know what you value, then you're not going to be looking to the next person and going, oh, I wish I was them. No, because actually, I like who I am and I like what I stand for and what I'm doing right now. And this is my path right now. So I think it's just making these small shifts. And a phrase that I love is stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. Like, stop looking. Because if you look, they're going to run past you anyway. So just stay in your lane and enjoy doing what you're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. Knowing your values is such an important, it's a really powerful tool. And because our values change, right, throughout our lives, and they're constantly shifting and changing. So when you get in the habit of revisiting them, it really does help keep you focused, whether it's personal, professional. We have another question. What mindset shifts can help individuals navigate uncertainty without losing motivation or self-belief?
So when we think of mindset shifts, I think the power of reframing is something that I find to be profound in my life. And it's the way you look at that situation that just unfolded. I often say to people, you can drink as much kale juice as you like and, stand on your head and do meditation in a cave. But if your mindset is one that's of a scarcity mindset, doesn't matter what you drink, you're not going to get to where you need to go. This is so important. This is so powerful. So looking at the power of reframing certain situations, reframing failure, reframing mistakes. Something that I often share with parents to do at home is to normalize making mistakes. When you sit around the table at night, don't ask, what was your highlight today? And what was your, no, don't ask that question. Ask, what mistake did you make today? What mistake did you make today? Oh, let me tell you what mistake I made. I took the wrong turn off on Sheikh Zayed Road and I was 45 minutes late to that meeting. And the reason I took the wrong turn off is because I went onto my phone while I was driving. And so what I've learned from that is I'm now putting my phone in my bag, and when I drive, I don't even pick it up because then I'm just with the moment. So by doing this exercise with kids and asking them what's the mistake you made, you normalize mistakes. You also model taking ownership when you do make a mistake and what you learn from that. And that's the growth mindset.
This is, again, we touched on this slightly another question, but it definitely, I think we need to, for parents, it's useful. How do we as parents balance supportive versus pushing?
Wow, that's a really good one. As you said, supportive, I immediately thought of gentle parenting. And I'm going to just say it out loud and proud. I'm not a fan of gentle parenting, right? Because sometimes that supportive means that everything goes. And then we end up raising a generation of very entitled individuals. Okay? You get a prize, you get a prize, and you get a prize. But life is not that way. So, how do I balance support alongside pushing my child is to be connected and attuned to my child. If you are connected and attuned to your child, you will know when to push, you will know when to back off. And nobody knows your child as well as you do. Not any mental health care professional, not any teacher, not any sports coach. You know your child, that there's that motherly instinct, there's that fatherly instinct. And so as long as you stay connected to your child and attuned to them, you will know what it is that they're feeling. And this is where emotional intelligence comes in. And there are three pillars of emotional intelligence. There's self-awareness, there's self-regulation, and there's social awareness. And if I am socially aware and I am understanding that my child may be struggling right now, and I'm curious with my child, that's going to go a lot further than the parent who is just pushing their own agenda onto their child. So when you feel like, am I pushing my child too much? You need to think, are you pushing your child because your child needs this? Or is that what you needed when you were 18 and you never got it from your parent? Now you're pushing it onto your child. So this is where I feel it's helpful to be in your own therapy process just to understand yourself better. Yeah.
I think there's also that part about that we know our children, but just like we're evolving constantly and we're changing through different phases, whether it's every 7 years or more or less, they're growing and they're discovering. And that idea of staying curious, constantly getting, like you say, asking them the questions and continually being open to getting to know their versions of themselves that they are experimenting with and going through. There's been some wonderful sharing as well. So thank you so much for everyone that's shared your thoughts on the conversation, and definitely some very aligned feelings. We have another one, which is, I think, very, very relevant in our landscape today. Beyond social media, AI has become another major force we all need to pay attention to, one that can create meaningful, positive impact, but also be misused. How is AI going to shape the lives and futures of young women and students?
Wow. I have a complicated relationship with AI. On the one hand, I look at it and I'm like, wow, it can really make our life easier when we are trying to get organized in our minds around something. But I do fear that it's not allowing people to think for themselves. And I think that if we over rely on it, like anything in life, there's a Greek saying pan metron ariston, which means everything in moderation. So if you're going to do something, I would say, like, do it in moderation. However much you're using this this thing, what I want you to know is that AI is not accurate always. AI is not always updated. And so I think it's important that you don't see it as this godly thing that it knows everything and that it's going to tell me exactly what I need to do. And my biggest fear is how we use AI as our therapist, where, there's been a lot of, alarming things that have come out about how, this teen attempted suicide or actually completed suicide because of what AI was instructing it. There's a story of this guy prompting AI and saying, I've just lost my job. Where's the tallest building in Brooklyn? And the chat said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear you lost your job. The tallest building in Brooklyn is da 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 da. So it can't pick up on nuances always, So I do think that in order to protect our futures, we need to stay relational. And I am hopeful because I do see a lot of people moving in the direction of going back to what was and wanting to live more of that type of life. So it really comes back to your values, as we said earlier. Whatever values you are practicing in your home are going to become your child's default value system when they leave the home. So if relationality and connection and sitting at a table and not having your phone on the table is a value in your home, your child's going to leave and go to uni and probably going to want to do the same.
I think I often tell myself, but also my kids, I mean, AI ChatGPT is probably one of the most opinionated voices in our lives and always thinks it can make things better, that your work, your thoughts, your words aren't good enough because it can always make it better. But it doesn't necessarily need to be made better. It's just that version of what you've already put out there. Okay, we have a last question. As a mother, what's one small anchor you can hold on to when everything feels uncertain? And I think this is something, in times of uncertainty, whether we're, when we're supporting our young people, our children, we feel like we need to have all the answers, right? And we need to be that source of calm and steadfast and provide that stability. But what can we do for ourselves as mothers to be able to weather that?
Wow. That's an interesting one. What's one small thing that you can do? I'm going to say, and this can be a broad statement, trust the love. Trust the love that you have in your relationship with your child to know that it will withstand whatever change is going to come from whatever is going to happen in the future. And I would also say, stay with today. So as a mom, when so much is changing and there's so many things in the future that are going to be different, just stay with today, because when you stay with today, you can actually just enjoy this moment and have, because this is the only moment that and you don't know actually what's going to happen in the future. So I would say just stay with today. And another thing I would say is play with today. Be agile, be flexible. When I say play with today, I mean being able to pivot, being able to think on your feet, being able to adjust things. You don't have to do things a certain way just because you did them a certain way all the time. You're allowed to do something different. So that's what I mean when I say these mantras, stay with today. It's just stay with this moment because you don't have control over the future. And play with today is be agile, be flexible, be playful, because through being playful, we invite a lightness into our lives.
And we had a chat 2 weeks ago, and we were talking. I spoke to you about that power and vulnerability. And sometimes we think we need to have all the answers, but actually, I think that there's a lot of strength and a lot of power sometimes just being able to sit with your children in that uncertainty and say, I don't have the answers and I don't know, but what I know is that somehow it's going to be okay. And Dr. Saleha had said in our first session about faith and holding on, just having faith. and fears not being facts. So I think there's a lot of strength just being able to say, I don't know, but it's going to be okay.
That's
Oh, right. We're coming to the end of the session. So before we close, if there were one thing to leave our young people, to leave our mums joining us on the call, maybe one thing each group that we could hold on to through these very uncertain times or times of uncertainty, what would those be?
I would say own your morning. Focus on what is in your control. What do you have agency over right now? So owning your morning and then asking yourself, which value is that linked to? Because when we operate from a place of our values, we are far more likely to do the same thing again and again. So if I know that owning my morning is linked to a value of health and well-being, then I'm more motivated to do it again because I know my why. And that's the other thing that I will say to you is know your why. Because even as parents, sometimes we get overwhelmed when we maybe set a boundary with our child because maybe they're watching too much TikTok reels, and you then say, no, you've had enough time. If you know your why and you know the value underneath that restriction, you are far more confident to stick to your why. Because in my family, we value balance and we value health. And that's why I'm saying to you, no more time on TikTok. So values-driven parenting is the way to go, yeah, to know what it is that I value. Then I can set limits. Then I can set boundaries. Then I can set, what the norm for what is acceptable in our home, because I'm aligned with our value system. And something that I often say to parents is create a values wheel. Sit with your teenagers, sit with your children, and work out what are our top 10, 15 values in our home. And then go to Creative Minds and buy a A3 canvas and sit down with paint and coloring in pencils and draw a values wheel. And in every spoke of the wheel, put down a value in your home. So, for example, generosity, gratitude, kindness, respect, perseverance, love, trust, courage, balance, and the list goes on. And when your child says to you, I want more time on TikTok or PlayStation, you can say no, because in our home we value health and we can point to the wheel. Or when your child has done one karate lesson and you've paid for the whole term and they say they don't want to go back, you can say, no, you are going to go back, because in our home we value perseverance. And once you've done with that month or those few sessions, you don't ever have to do it again. Right? So having a wheel in your home allows for your child to know what your default values are as well.
That's so powerful. Own the morning and know your why. Kristine, thank you so much for your time. This has been such an insightful session. And Aya, thank you for joining us and being a voice for your peers. And of course, everyone, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time this afternoon. I think what we've experienced or explored today is that uncertainty isn't something to eliminate or avoid. It's something that we can learn to navigate. And while we often focus on preparing our young women academically or professionally for what's ahead, it's equally important that we equip them with the emotional tools to manage uncertainty, build confidence, and trust themselves through that change. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, for your engagement, for your reflections throughout the conversation. Kristine, Aya, thank you again. And I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you, ladies. Take care.
Thank you, Kristine. Bye-bye.